in a democracy. You've said post-truth is pre-fascism.
If that's not true, then we don't have freedom of speech. Our first defense against that has to be, oh, wait a minute, there is truth.
I am so excited and honored to be able to chat today with the Professor Timothy Snyder. I really think he needs no introduction. Hello, first of all. How are you today?
Thank you. Really good. Happy to be talking to you.
Very happy to have you here. For anybody who needs the credentials, as you know, Professor Snyder is the author, a best-selling author of On Tyranny. He's also written on freedom more recently, definitely worth a read for some invigorating thinking. And his Substack is called Thinking About. Professor Snyder, there's so much we could talk about. I think that first I should say thank you to you because I see you, I've watched so many of your interviews and you patiently re-explain yourself all the time. And you offer this enormously helpful reframe on things we all see every day, but you give it to us in a perspective that's enormously clarifying. So thank you for what you do.
Thanks. That's very kind. You might want to look at the feedback from your listeners and make sure your audio is okay. I can understand you, but I think your audio might be a little bit off.
Oh, God. Really?
Okay, now you sound great.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so invoking divinity seemed to work. All
okay,
right.
God, please be with us. Thank you. Whatever it takes. These days, I'm open to all options. So I want to ask, in your work first, you've laid out the stages of decline of democracy and progression to autocracy. In your assessment, where is the U.S. in that progression right now?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that always has to be said is that democracy is not a state of affairs. It's not even really a system, it's a desire. So if we see ourselves as just watching a process as it unfolds, then you're not going to have democracy, no matter what. Trump, no Trump, oligarchy, no oligarchy, doesn't matter. If we just watch it, you're never going to have democracy. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It's a series of actions based on moral commitments. But I don't mean to dodge the question. I would say we are much worse off than we were a year ago. I think we're also at a place, though, where people are locally and nationally recognizing the harms and self-organizing, which is the key to getting out of all of this. So things are very bad, but by no means so bad that they can't be repaired and resisted.
Oh, that's good news. My audience has heard me say many times that the free press is the only public institution. The free press is the only private institution that is explicitly protected in the US Constitution because our founders saw it as so vital to a well-functioning democracy. You talk in all your work and your writing about the importance of having verifiable facts in a democracy. You've said post-truth is pre-fascism. So I wonder if you'd give us an assessment of where the American press is right now. Do you think they're strengthening democracy or accelerating the decline? And just more broadly, what's working, what has to change?
Okay, before I answer that, I was going to take a step back and tell you why I think these issues are important, because of course it matters that we have the First Amendment, but there are things that even go beneath that or underlie it, let's say. One is that in order to have a democracy, you have to be able to speak truth to power. That's fundamental. So the reason why we have a First Amendment is not just for itself, it's to enable people to speak truth to power, because speaking truth to power is physically dangerous. It can lead to you being imprisoned or wounded or killed. And so that's the purpose of the First Amendment. And I stress that because a lot of the conversation in free speech, not on your show, but in our society in general, is about how the wealthy should be able to own social media platforms or whereas in fact, what free speech is about is whether the least powerful among us can make her or his voice heard. And if that's not true, then we don't have freedom of speech. Second thing that I wanted to say before we get to the answer to the question is that the thing that's important about facts is that they're unpredictable. They're not what you expect. Propaganda is always predictable. It's, the thing which is useful for the people in power at that moment. But facts, like is the school board corrupt or is the water polluted? Those things are unpredictable. And it's the unpredictability of facts which keeps us alert and allows us to challenge whatever is being done against us. So in that light, what I would say is that what we need to have is a huge amount of courageous fact-finding potential. And some of that has to be in the private sector. Ideally, you would have a lot of that, in fact, funded by the government. We're not in that situation right now. As for how we're doing, I would say that the people who I treasure, the people who are doing the most important work, are the ones who are on the ground doing the investigative reporting, letting us know both the harms, but also the examples of resistance. So from international press point of view, I know for a fact, and even from national press point of view to a certain extent, you don't really know how much people in Chicago were doing to protect people during ICE raids. But from local reporting, you do, right?
Right.
So I would say the picture is very mixed. We don't have enough people doing enough fact finding, but we do have the ethic. And I think we're in a position where we can learn how important the ethic of reporting on the ground is.
Ironically, it's the one thing that has the least financial support, but that's how we, are
It's
surviving these days.
It's not,
Um,
It's not ironic. I mean, it's like you have to I mean, you can't do democracy without fact finding. And so you have to define it as something which is valuable, and courage can only take you so far.
So I've heard you say that democracies need, quote, I'm very interested in this whole question of facts and disinformation and where we are in our sort of in the information ecosystem, right? We're in this sort of awkward adolescence of a media revolution. We're dealing with platforms that are tuned to virality, not veracity. And, the public doesn't really know how to discern what's true these days. That's increasingly the case. You have said that democracies need, your language was, structures of factuality, or they end up outsourcing that reality to the loudest voice. I think you said this with regard to when X turned on Location Finder and we saw that all these MAGA accounts were from foreign countries and bots. But this idea of a structure of factuality, it's something that could apply to challenges with disinformation that come from within the US too. Notionally, what would that look like? And how do you think it would run, or who might stand something like that up?
That's a great question. I'll do my best. One of the final chapters in On Freedom, which you were kind enough to mention, is exactly about that, the chapter on factuality. I appreciate the fundamental way you posed the question, because it is something that has to be stood up. It doesn't happen on our own. Like we flatter ourselves, and we are flattered to believe that we know everything and we make the right judgments, and our impulses are always based upon good judgment. And that's actually one of the ways that democracy is killed, is that when we are told that our impulses are the same thing as the truth. Because the truth is a lot harder to control. The truth is impossible to control. It's possible to suppress it, but it's impossible to control it. Whereas our impulses are, much as we might flatter ourselves to the contrary, our impulses are actually pretty easy to control. We can be fed a diet of things that upset us, that anger us, that traumatize us. And because of the way social media works, like unlike radio or printing press, which radical as they were, only went in one direction, social media goes in both directions. So we reveal what traumatizes us and what frightens us and what makes us anxious. And then that is used against us. So you have to, as you say, you have to stand up a structure. And the structure, in my view, begins with public education without screens, or where screens are only used where the child is the agent and the child is being taught how to program. Local news, subsidized if necessary, and blue states should do this. Private organizations should do this. If you had control of the national government, you would tax social media in order to do this. But fact-finding local news, which is subsidized as necessary because it's a public good. Philosophically, behind all of this, you would need to have to say things like sort of the kind of thing that you said, that there is truth. Right? Because if philosophically you say like, oh, there's just opinions, it doesn't really matter, then you're creating the ground for oligarchy and social media monopolies to control our impulses at a very large scale. Because our only defense, like our first defense against that, has to be, oh, wait a minute, there is truth. Like there's truth about whether the water is polluted. There's truth about whether the city council is corrupt. If you give away the question of truth at the beginning, then you can never stand anything up. Then you've basically given up before it's even started.
Interesting. It's so interesting because I have a lot of conversations with people who are trying to solve for what's the future of news and how do we stand up media. And I'll get in these conversations and we'll be talking about it. And then halfway through, that person will go, but do people care about truth anymore? Do we think facts matter? And it's so strange to me that it's even like we have to hold that they matter. And assume that there are many others who care too. What does it say to you that we're in a place where people are even asking that?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that, again, in every profession worthy of the name, there's a heroic aspect. So there is a heroic aspect to nursing. There's a heroic aspect to medicine. There's even a heroic aspect to being a lawyer. Like there are plenty of, sorry, that like there are plenty of things that lawyers can do that are heroic. Like on the basis of your professional training, you can defend the weak. You can do a pro bono case. Doctors can choose to go to impoverished places and vaccinate. So like, and from my point of view, journalists have probably the greatest heroic potential in what they do, which isn't to say that every journalist is heroic, of course, but it does mean that heroic potential is always there. And part of the answer to that question of like, do people care about facts? Like that's part of the heroism, that you go out and report anyway, right? Like you don't ask, do people care if there's a war in Sudan? You still report on the war in Sudan, right? You don't ask if there's a war in Ukraine. You say you report on the war in Ukraine, and then it will make a difference. So, but it does require like a certain ethic and a certain willingness to, to go against the truth that there's a morass of indifference out there all the time. But I mean, the other part of the answer to the question is that I do think that in journalism, and in the humanities and in other places in our society, we have to not be afraid to sound a little naive and say, actually, there are facts and they're different than non-facts. And, we can have long debates about exactly what truth is, but there is in fact truth. And the presence of huge lies, actually reminds us how important truth is, and that it is out there. So, but when you take a position in journalism, and this is, not to pick on the New York Times, but this is one of their problems, and actually it's a problem of the whole society. If you say that, there's one opinion, there's another opinion, and the truth is in between, that is nuts. It's just not true. Like I have an opinion and, somebody else has an opinion, but if we're both wrong, as we probably are, the truth is not in between our two wrong views. And when we take that approach to truth, that it's like in between two views, what we do is we weaponize those who have power and money to stake out an incredibly radical position on one side. And then like the so-called news gravitates in that direction. And so I think, we're very like, in a way, our cynicism brings us down, because our cynicism like takes us a couple of steps towards the view that like, oh, there isn't really truth, or it doesn't really matter, nobody wants to hear it. We have to be willing to sound a little naive and say, actually, there is, whether there's mercury or not in the water, or whether climate change is real, these are questions that have true answers.
Wow, I could talk to you about this all day. That made me
Usually
feel
people
so
say that when it means like you've just gone on a long rant. So sorry if
no, because this is what I want to talk about, but my audience wants me to ask you some other things. So I'm going to ask you other topics, but connected, which is you've written about Peter Thiel and the rise of tech billionaires who have outsized political influence. If you had to make an assessment, what's the single biggest democratic risk posed by these tech oligarchs right now? And do you believe that the US is in danger of becoming basically a privatized surveillance state?
It's interesting. Like life is life is like life is more beautiful than literature. Like I say that as somebody who loves literature, but there's so much science fiction, and the tech guys in general have read so much of it, and nevertheless they have become the villain of the story. It's really extraordinary, and they think they often think they're the hero of the story, but they've become like the notion, like there is no positive science fiction story in which a few billionaires control the information environment. Right? There are negative science, but there are no positive ones. So there's something like there's something kind of terribly ironic about all this.
They took it as a roadmap for themselves.
Yeah, up to some of them, but up to a point, they think that, I mean, this is the thing, like you generally you think you're the good guy. Like there are few people who actually think they're the bad guy. Right. The part of the problem with being extremely wealthy is that nobody says no to you. And part of the problem of being extremely wealthy and controlling a social media platform is that you not only does nobody say no to you, but you push out all of your wrong yeses on everybody else all of the time, and then they come back to you, which makes things even worse. I think the main problem with wealth and concentration of wealth is that it warps reality for everybody else, because everyone is always, and this is just a historical point. Well, it was true in ancient Greece, it's true in the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth. It's always true that when people are too wealthy, it warps reality around them. It makes it hard to tell the truth and see the truth around them. And this is ironic because they themselves think that they are a point of logical, calm truth, but it's actually the opposite. Like they think they're a telescope, but actually they're a black hole. Like they're warping everything around them so that nothing can really be seen. And that warping is political too. because they have so much wealth, they create client bases around themselves who are working in their interests, but not in the interests of the larger republic. And that's how republics go down. So those are two of the things. But I mean, the immediate danger is that too few people are taking too much money, are making too much money by making us just too stupid. That's the immediate danger. Like when I think of AI, like I don't worry about AI being smarter than us. I worry which is dumber, you know, us or AI. I feel like it's a race to the bottom in which like each side is making the other more stupid.
So it sounds to me like you're almost more concerned about the damaging impact of the social media platforms like Meta than you are about the insidious work that Palantir is doing, for example, or they're both terrible. So why compare?
I think, I mean, not to sound like, not to be too glib, but I think it's two elements of the same story. So for
Mm,
me, democracy is the people wanting to rule, and for people to want to rule, they have to be people. And so systems which reduce us, as the social media platforms do, to mechanized algorithms of our own fears and traumas, or systems which draw information about our probable future behaviors, as some of the Palantir stuff does. For me, it's like it's all part of the same issue, which is that we're choosing to use our human capacities to demean and diminish our human capacities,
mm,
which make us unfit to rule ourselves. So, I mean, I guess I don't really want to choose. I see it as I see it as like one larger whole.
mm. Put that really beautifully. Switching topics, I want to ask you for a moment about ICE. So much of what we see on social media these days is these horrifying images of people being snatched off the streets. And then the worst part is we don't know what happens to them very often. People are disappeared into the system, and the system is designed to give us no visibility. Not only do we feel powerless, but in this case, it seems that we are quite powerless. So people ask me, what is a concerned citizen to do when they can't access the people that our government is holding and they don't know how to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have an answer that's going to, you know, resolve all of it, but there are a few things to say. Number one, it's really important to use historical and conceptual vocabulary to describe what's going on. So it's okay to call detention centers concentration camps. It's okay to use words like the one that you just used, disappeared. It's okay to use words that invoke other things which can help us see the larger structure of what's going on in the US. It's okay to be shocked by this. The second thing is that, of course, there are some practical things that people do to prevent apprehensions, as we've learned from cities like Chicago. I mean, there are social media videos from Chicago and elsewhere which teach you how to blow whistles, like how to give
Yeah.
warnings, how to at least make it harder for this process to advance, but also to show your own resistance, which matters a lot because even though you can't stop all the apprehensions and disappearances, I agree, you can make it harder, but you can also change the overall atmosphere by making it clear that some people care about their neighbors and they care
Mhm.
about people who are around them. But yeah, beyond that, I mean, I don't have an answer which can make this go away, except that one has to see the outrageousness of it and describe the outrageousness of it, and one has to do the little things one can to make it seem not normal, even if you
Right.
can't stop it, to make it seem not normal, because people really don't like it. But the fact that they don't like it isn't quite enough. It has to be don't like it plus some resistance plus some language about it.
So our job is to make sure people don't get numb to it in a way, in
Yeah.
addition to helping people with whatever strategies to not get taken.
Yeah, because I mean, the only way this doesn't win on its own. The only way this thing wins is by normalization. Like this is
Mhm.
not popular. Most people don't like it. Some people like the violence, but most people don't. And but we can get used to anything. And so you have to stop ourselves from getting used to it and help our fellow Americans or help our neighbors not to get used to it.
Okay. Uh, I have one more question before I get to my audience questions, which is this is one that I struggle with personally. And you're so good because you do praxis, theory and practice come together. In order to defeat something like this, a threat to democracy, we need coalitions. You call it solidarity, which means
Mm.
literally, if I disagree with you about something else, we can still work together on this larger project and live to battle each other another day on those other issues. For some reason, Americans at this moment seem very bad at this. There's canceling. There's what I call, Freud called it the narcissism of small differences. We have to agree on everything to work together. And you see it even in meetings of people showing up to try to do something and they start falling out. Why do you think we're in this place? And what would you say to the audience listening about how to start in their own lives recognizing that behavior so we can move toward a coalition mindset?
Wow, do I love that question. So where does it come from? I think part of it does come from social media, where we can get used to always being right and being right in quotation marks, and being surrounded by people who agree with us, and where we get used to the little jolts of affirmation all of the time. And then we want life to be about constant little jolts of affirmation. And not, marriage isn't like that. Friendship isn't like that, let alone political coalitions. It's not going to be a constant series of small jolts of affirmation. So social media is part of it. And that does have the practical implication, right? Which is that you should use social media to organize things in the real world. And if you're not using it for that purpose, to conceptualize bad things and to organize people in the real world, if it's not for those purposes, then maybe you shouldn't be on social media. I now want to say, so I'll say something directly about the left. I think the whole cancel culture thing, I'm going to try to write something about cancel culture because it's an intriguing concept, but like 99% of it, in my experience at least, is left on left. Like the right talks about it a lot, but the left usually doesn't try to cancel the right. It's usually the left trying to cancel the left. And it's on the, philosophically, the problem is that it's on the basis of being perfectly correct about everything. And of course, the only person who's perfectly correct about everything is yourself. And everyone else, has got, they understand colonialism slightly wrongly, or they're not correct about what caused the civil rights movement, or, whatever it is. Other people are, and there's so much pleasure that can be taken in pointing out how other people are wrong about things. And the problem with that is that you do that and it expends energy, and you mistake it for political action, because you have this fantasy that, okay, if I can correct every single person on the left's incorrect views on social media, then we will have somehow we will have shined up a ball, we will have smoothed out a surface, and then we can have political action, right? And I'm caricaturing a little bit, but this dynamic is real. Whereas the truth is, we're never going to all be smoothed out. We're all going to be wrong on a bunch of stuff all the time. The crucial thing is, can you actually act politically to change the world? And you can't do it by yourself. You can only do it in an organization. You can only do it in a coalition. And so the test for yourself is, am I actually out in the world doing something? And a lot of your viewers pass this test, and a lot of them pass it better than me, no doubt. But the question is, am I doing something? Is it in a group of 2 or 3 or 5 or 500 or 5 million? It doesn't really matter. But that's the test. Am I in the real world actually organizing positively, right? Because if you're doing that, then you've earned yourself the right a little bit, to mess around on social media. But if you're not, if you're not, then it's really counterproductive. So, and then the practical thing, which you've already said, but I'm going to repeat, you can't, the political scientists say, and they're right about this, you can't get out of this without coalition. There will be a coalition. It's going to involve a protest movement, an opposition party, labor unions, a few other things, right? And then that coalition takes up enough of the political space that it can win. But if you just think it's the opposition party, you're going to lose. We're already past the state where that's sufficient. The opposition party only works as part of a broader coalition. And being part of a coalition means there are going to be people to the right of you or the left of you, always, pretty much. And it means you have to listen out of both ears, as well as being able to talk, right? Because being a coalition doesn't mean that you suppress all the differences. It doesn't mean that, right? It doesn't even mean that you accept that people are right about things. It does mean, though, that, as you say, you think, if we get to a democracy, then we'll be able to sort these things out. And we value a democracy positively, and that's why it's worth making this coalition in order to get there.
Gosh, please write that piece. Okay. That's needed. So beautifully put. Is Poland a good case study to see where coalition has worked?
Yeah.
The solidarity movement there?
Well, Poland 8081 is a classic example of how in authoritarian conditions you can win with an unpredictable coalition, which was a big labor movement plus Catholic intellectuals plus left-wing intellectuals, plus some peasant movements.
Mm.
That's like the paradigmatic example of how you can have an unexpected coalition. There's also Poland in 2023, where they were in a situation which is kind of similar to ours, and they managed to win the parliamentary elections by having a coalition which went from center right to far left, which is basically, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but that is basically what you got to do.
Got it.
If you can do center right to far left, you can win, and then you can fight out the other stuff afterwards. But if you can't do center right, if you lose the far left, or if you lose the center right, you can't do it. You're not going to have the numbers to win the clear victory that you need.
Okay, that's important to remember. I'm going to ask you some questions from the audience. We only have a few more minutes. I don't want to take up more of your time. Does the republic survive without real consequences for people who tried to overturn it? Do they need to be punished?
That's an incredibly well formulated question. I would say that the law has to be applied. Like, I don't think we're going to be, we don't want to get into like a French Revolutionary situation where we make up a new regime of law. I think there are a lot of areas in the US where just applying the law would do the job. And this is probably one of them. So this is something that, like, I come at this from Russia, where one of the big problems with Russia is the notion of crime without punishment and punishment without crime. That, you can do whatever you want, and you will never, nothing will ever happen to you, and you can hurt whoever you want. Crime without punishment, punish without crime. So yes, there has to be a notion of punishment for sure. And I think part of the problem we're in is that some of the folks who are in power now don't imagine that the republic is going to survive in that form. They think they're going to get away with it. And so yes, there has to be punishment, but in legal categories, and that would be enough.
Okay, I'm going to compound my last questions so that you can take whichever of them, because we'll stay on time. A lot of people are asking themselves the question, what are the signs when it's time to leave? And are we close to that? Do you think the US will remain a democracy? And what, if anything, is giving you hope right now?
So I have lots of hope, because history is always open, and more things are possible than you think. And that is like why I sometimes seem like I'm really, dark, and sometimes I seem like I'm really bright, because some of the things that can happen are quite bad, and one has to be aware of that. But also some things that can happen are quite good. There are things that worked out better than people predicted at the time, and that's worth keeping in mind, right? That much of Europe emerged from the Second World War into a much better situation than it was in before the Second World War, right? There are moments when you come out of things and it's much better than you expect. So that can happen. That's one reason I'm hopeful. Another reason I'm hopeful is that the way to be hopeful is to have friends who are more courageous than you are and do stuff with them, right? This goes back to the earlier conversation about coalitions and the internet and stuff. Have friends who are more organized and more courageous than you, and do the things that they're doing. Because hope is it's not just a state of affairs, it's also politics. If you don't have hope, then you are not going to get over this. And the way to have hope is to do the micro things with the right people. Something similar about democracy. Like, as I said before, like, you can't just watch democracy. Democracy isn't a thing, it's a verb. Like, are you doing democracy? If we all do a little bit of democracy, I really do think all this is going to turn out. And I'm missing one question, Jessica.
When do you know if it's time to leave?
So I have no answer, because the only way I have to have like a 7-hour conversation with each individual about this. But I do have one thing to say about it, and it's this: it is reasonable for people to go. I mean, historically speaking, it's reasonable. And then the second thing I say is that when people do go, political diasporas, political refugees are often incredibly useful people. They can sometimes do things abroad that can't be done at home, and sometimes they gather resources abroad or experiences abroad, which can be useful later at home. And so one historical lesson is don't dismiss those people who go, because sometimes the people who go first are the ones who have the most reason to go, i.e. they've done the most, i.e. they're useful people, right? And then the third thing about this, like the practical answer is, I can't tell you because I don't know who's asking the question, but figure it out for yourself and write it down on a piece of paper, or tell your friends, write it down in your diary, whatever, just write it down, make it permanent, because when the moment comes when you should go, you won't do it, almost certainly, because you'll have normalized, you'll have adjusted, you'll say, now's the right time, I'm just about to pay off my mortgage, my kid's a senior in college, whatever. You'll find a reason not to do it. So if you're thinking seriously about this, the way to do it is Now decide what your lines are and write them down. Seal them in an envelope, give them to your spouse, whatever. But decide now, and then when that line comes, do what you said you were going to do. That's my practical advice about all this.
You are so good. You are such an abstract thinker and really concrete with the advice. It is a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. I'd love to do this again sometime next year.
Yeah, great. I'll look forward to that.
Have a great holiday.
You too.
Take good care. Everybody, we'll share this, and be sure to follow his Substack and buy On Tyranny and On Freedom. See you soon, Professor.
Thanks.